Marker. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Cornerstone, the show where we attempt to navigate our culture through a biblical lens. I'm your host, Shane Kai, and I apologize for not getting this out earlier. I was supposed to record yesterday and have this video edited and uploaded by around 12 today, which is Sunday. But I had a pretty important meeting yesterday with a couple of friends that could not be postponed any further. So here I am recording on Sunday, and hopefully I'll get this out by the time that everyone gets off of work on Monday. So around like 4 or 5. We have a pretty fun topic for today, but before I go any further, there's a couple things I wanted to mention that I've been meaning to mention since the first episode, and I just keep forgetting. Everything that you see and hear before you in this video is subject to change. I would like to have a better set piece at some point. I would like to have a chair, for example, to actually sit in and have this nightstand be level with my arms instead of at my neck. I'd like to have a more concrete setup for my microphone. And I also don't love the idea of my computer being in the shot, but that's just what I have to do right now. I'd love to have a little shelf behind me with maybe a plant and a candle. I'd love to have a lot of things, but I can't have them right now. 1, because they don't fit the budget. And 2, even if I did have the budget for them, I don't have the space. So maybe when I move out of my parents' house, I'll have a bigger room, or maybe I'll have the same size room, but I'll be able to experiment with my room a little bit more because I'm not able to do so right now. The second thing is the audio that you hear. If you've really been paying attention the last 2 episodes, which I don't blame you if you didn't, you would have noticed that the setup for my microphone has been different every time. The first time was, I think, like right about here-ish, pretty close to, like right about here. And then the second time was like right up to my face, like right here. And pretty much the whole time in that video, the microphone was blocking like a quarter of my face. Well, now I have it way up here. And the reason why I'm changing the setup of this microphone is, again, for 2 reasons. The one of them I just listed. I don't want the microphone to be blocking my face. I think it just doesn't look very good or professional. And the second reason is I am not very good at mixing audio. So I'm trying to find the best settings and the best setup and the best gain to get really good audio without picking up excessive noise. So I think last time what I did was I turned the audio, like the gain on the microphone really low, but I put it right up to my face. This time what I'm doing is I'm turning the gain up a little bit higher, but I'm putting it away from my face. So we'll see how that works. And hopefully within the next couple episodes, I'll have fine-tuned everything and I'll figure out exactly what I need to do to give you the best audio experience. I believe this position is probably going to stick. I think this is a really good position. So now I just kind of have to fine-tune the gain and figure out how loud does the microphone need to be in order to hear my voice clearly, but not hear all of the weird, gross saliva sounds that are in my mouth. You know what I mean? So it may not be things that you pick up as the viewer, but as the editor, I hear them all the time. So I have to figure that out. Anyway, with that out of the way, we're going to try to get into today's topic, which is living in/of the world. What is the difference and how do we continue? By the way, today I have a little snack. I have my little sister Kaylee went to like an Asian restaurant and got this. I think she was telling me what it was, but I forgot what it was. So I have a little snack for me today. She brought this home for me. I thought it'd be kind of a funny running gag where in the middle of every episode I leave and I come back with some kind of snack. I don't have to force it, but I thought it'd be funny. I still don't know what it is, but it's pretty good. So we're going to begin our topic reading the context verse. And I'll be honest, I didn't know where it was, but I found out. It's in John chapter 15, I believe, in the New Testament. This does not look right. I must be at the wrong verse. Oh, I was at the wrong verse. It is John 17, 15 through 21. So it's actually interesting, though the last topic that we had in, in our little devotional, we were kind of talking about, like, if the world hates you, then just know they don't hate you because of you. They hate you because of me that resides in you. So this is actually kind of building a little bit on top of that. So starting in verse 13, going all the way to verse 21, I believe, or maybe before that. I don't know. We'll see. Verse 13. So now this is Jesus speaking, by the way. But now I come to you, and these things I speak in the world, that they may have my joy fulfilled in themselves. I have given them your word, and the world has hated them because they are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. So in this, he's praying to his Father for his disciples. So all these, the context is he's saying, I have given them your word. I meaning Jesus, and your meaning the Father. And he's talking, them being the disciples and really anyone. And the world has hated them, that being the disciples, because they are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. Verse 15, I do not pray that you should take them out of the world, but that you should keep them from the evil one. They are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. Sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, I also have sent them into the world, and for their sakes I sanctify myself, that they may also be sanctified by the truth. I'm actually going to stop there. I'm not going to continue to verse 21. So now that we have the context, we can dive a little bit further. So Jesus is praying to his Father, telling them that he gave them his word, and they accepted it, and the world hated them for that, and now they live in the world but not of it. And I wanted to talk about that. A lot of this video will be kind of skirting the line between objective truth and subjective opinion. And I think that is kind of the point. That's what I wanted to get into in this video. I wanted to talk about that saying that we use all the time. We live in the world, but we do not live of the world. What does it mean in general, in concept, but also what does it mean in practicality? Because I think they're two different things. And we just kind of looked at in concept, what does it mean? We hear God's word, we accept it as truth, and now God, the Father, resides in our hearts, and now the world hates us for that fact. So we are not accepted by the world, but we still live on earth. So that's where we get the saying, we live in earth, but we're not of the earth. We are not from them, we are not accepted by them. And so we're set apart in a way. We're not necessarily some kind of, extremely righteous group. And by righteous, I mean perfect, because I guess you could say we are righteous. But what I mean is we're not perfect, right? We're not the perfect people. We're not the gated community that never sins, right? That's not what it's saying. It's just saying that we're not defined by the world, and the world did not create who we are. God created who we are. We live in it, but we're not of it. We're not from it. We're not defined by it. So in concept, it makes a lot of sense, at least to me. And I think in concept, a lot of people might go, wow, okay, that's cool. But then they're going to say, what does it mean practically? Because I got the concept, I got the verse, it's great, sounds good. But what about practically? How do I act this out on a day-to-day life? How is that going to affect my decision making? And I think that's where things get a lot more complicated. I see all the time on social media and in real life, people professing to be Christian, arguing back and forth about things we should be doing and things we shouldn't be doing. Saying this is not what God intended. And some of them have verses to back them up. Others do not. And this is the topic I wanted to talk about. So I wanted to maybe give a little bit of insight. And like I said, some of this is my opinion. So if you disagree, totally fine. I'm gonna bring the Bible into a little bit of it. So I think living in the world and not of the world, in that topic, there are 3 sections. I believe that there is objective convictions based on biblical truth. I also believe that there are subjective convictions that vary from person to person. And then there's also this weird gray area, and these are things that people can't seem to decide on. They can't seem to agree on. Some people believe it's objective, others believe that it's subjective. Some people believe that no one should be doing it, others believe that it's okay that I do it, but it's also okay that you don't want to do it. So, a couple of good examples. An objective biblical conviction is sexual immorality. Okay? That is just the truth. Okay? I have never met anyone, and if I do, I will smack the devil out of him. But I've never met anyone who professed to be a follower of Christ say that sexual immorality is not a big deal. Looking at porn is okay. Having an open relationship is okay. Opening the door to sexual deviancies that were not ordained by God. I've never heard a true follower of Christ say that. Now, I've heard plenty of people who claim they're followers of Christ say that. But, when they say that, I see right through them and I'm like, you're not. You're clearly not. But I've never met someone who I know is a follower of Christ and is a true believer, say any of those things. I've never been blown away by that. And if they were to say that, I would truly be blown away, because that would be crazy. I'd be like, whoa. So that is what I believe is an objective conviction. And you can find that objective conviction. I'll go ahead and bring up some verses. Galatians 5, verse 16 and onward. Okay, here we go. Verse 16, I say then, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary to one another, so that you do not do the things that you wish. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Now the works of the flesh are evident, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, contentions, jealousies, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambitions, dissensions, heresies, envy, murders, drunkenness, revelries, and the like, of which I tell you beforehand, just as I also told you in time past, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. I almost said inherit the kingdom of Gavin. Why? Who's Gavin? Okay. And then it goes on to list the fruit of the Spirit. So this right here, there are obvious objective convictions. Adultery is part of sexual immorality. It's lusting after someone else lusting after another person when you are already in a relationship / marriage. Lewdness is it's like being sexual and not caring, right? It's like the idea of being very open to sexuality, I guess that's how I would put it, at least. So those are things, like I said, objective convictions that Christians have. Really, no one is going to be debating us on that. And if they are debating us on that, they need to read their Bible more. Then you have subjective convictions, okay? And these are things that, like the name implies, they're subjective, which means that some people have them and others don't. A good example for me is I don't like strong violence in movies. I get a conviction against it. Well, movies and video games too. So, for example, there's a video game that I really like. I really want to play it because it looks really fun. And I've heard so many good things about it. And this game is called Doom Eternal. But I won't play it. I'm choosing not to play it because it has a lot of gore and violence and people getting cut and slashed in really weird ways. And it's for that reason I have that conviction. I have to, every time I get tempted and I'm like, man, I really should sit down to play that game because I've heard so many good things about it, but I'm never going to because at the end of the day, I have that conviction. Someone else may not have that conviction. They may not be nearly as vulnerable to violence. I have a friend who is an EMT, right? They're working in hospitals, they're working in ambulances. They see bodies every day, right? They see violent scenes all the time. I mean, they're not seeing necessarily like Jack the Ripper stuff, but they're seeing people dead, they're seeing people hurt and in trouble all the time, right? And so because of that, they've become slightly desensitized to violence. So sometimes they've invited me to watch a movie before that has a lot of violent content, and I've said, no, thank you, I'm not interested because I have this conviction. But I also don't hold it against them either. I don't say, you're not holy, you're not as good as me. I just look at them and go, well, he does live a different life. He's exposed to that kind of stuff all the time. And I know him personally. I know that he's still a strong follower of Christ. And I know that that content doesn't get in between him and God. So that's a subjective conviction where I go, I have a problem with it. I'm not going to subject myself to it. But I know that other people are forced to subject themselves to it because of their jobs, and they become desensitized to it. And so it's not as big of a problem for them. So then we have the gray area. And a good example of a gray area is foul language, where I don't have a conviction against hearing it, but I do have a conviction against saying it. And personally, I do believe that using foul language in our day-to-day lives is an objective conviction. That's something that I believe. I can't find it in those two verses. And I'm not going to spend 15 minutes looking around for them. But I do know that there are verses that mention that the tongue is one of the most dangerous weapons, and we're to use it wisely, right? This is an objective conviction that I believe in. I believe that this is an objective conviction, and I do believe that there are no Christians that should be using foul language. If it slips out, no big deal, right? I'm not saying that we should all be perfect, right? It slipped out for me too. I've said bad words too, okay? Because they've slipped out. So, but it's one thing to let a word slip out and say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. Will you forgive me? It's another thing to say when it slips out, oh, don't worry about it, it's not a big deal. Like, those are two different things. But this is a conviction that not all my friends have. Some of my friends believe it's subjective. Where they say, I can use foul language, and if you don't want to, that's fine, but for me, it's not a big deal. That's a gray area. Perfect example of a gray area. So now that we've kind of laid the ground rules of what one side is, the other, objective, subjective, then you have the gray area. How do we proceed? How do you proceed through life? How do you make good decisions? Well, here's what I believe. Again, I believe there are objective convictions that you should have, and there are subjective convictions, and then there's a gray area. All three of those topics are important, but I believe what's more important than any of those things is, where is your heart? Where is your heart? Because remember, in the beginning, he says, we do not live of the world, we just live in it. We are not defined by the world. We may do things in the world that the world has created, but we are not defined by it. And there's another verse in the Bible, I don't know where it is again, you can find it for yourself, says, where your treasure is, your heart will be also. Build your treasure and place your heart in heavenly treasures, not earthly treasures. So what does this mean? I think all of these verses are connected, loosely connected, and they're going to help me get to my point, which is, it doesn't really matter what you do here on earth. What matters is where your heart is. Now, someone might hear that and say, oh, does that mean that I can just sin all the time and access the eternal forgiveness whenever I want, but then continue to live a life in sin? Well, no, not really. I mean, technically, yeah, that's true, because none of us are going to be perfect. We're always going to be sinners, and we're always going to have access to that eternal forgiveness. So from a certain point of view, I guess that's true. But to answer your question, no, you can't desire to live in sin, because if you desire to live in your sin, then that's where your heart is. Your heart is in your sin. And you're building treasures, joy, satisfaction in the sin that you're committing. And we're not called to do that, because that would be living of the world. You'd be no different than someone who didn't believe in God at all. I've actually heard someone say, this is a legitimate argument that I've heard once when I was witnessing to someone. They said, well, couldn't you just fake it? Couldn't you just fake a relationship with God? Pretend like your heart is in it in order to get to heaven, but in reality you're still sinning? Well, we're talking about the God of the universe. If you and I pretend together that God is real, then we have to assume that God is omniscient, which is all-knowing, omnipresent, everywhere across all space and time at once, and omnipotent, which means all-powerful. So he has all the power in the world. He's everywhere across space and time all at the same time, and he's all-knowing. And you think that you can fake it? And that's what I ask. And I try not to be sarcastic. I'm being kind of sarcastic right now, but in the moment, I'm not sarcastic. And I say, hey, so you think you can fake a relationship with God? Do you think that you can trick him into thinking that your heart is in the right place? The God that created the universe, the God that knows everyone, the God that knew everyone that was going to be on earth before they were even born? You think you can fake a relationship with him? I don't think so. I think he's going to know. So, no, you can't fake a relationship with him. Your heart has to be with God. And now that's the interesting part. If your heart is in God, if your heart is with God and with heavenly treasures, naturally your body and your brain will follow suit. So that's kind of the age-old question that gets asked a lot is, I don't want to be a Christian, because I feel like I have to be a good person to get into heaven. And a lot of people think that way too. A lot of other religions think that they have to be good in order to get into heaven. But it's not true. Yes, it is true that we want to emulate God's character and we want to emulate a righteous person. We want to be righteous in every way and we want to be more like God. But it doesn't mean that we do that to get saved. We know that we are saved by the grace of God alone. Our work does not save us. So we don't do good, we don't act good, and we don't put our heart into good things because we think it's going to save us. We do it because we were saved. We put our heart into heavenly treasures not to be saved, but because we were saved. Because we were saved by the gift of God, we want to be more like him. So when you put your heart into heavenly treasures, when you put your heart with God, naturally you're going to want to start to be more like him. So it's not like a checklist of things that you have to do to be good. It's just like a lifestyle that you want to be like. It's just a lifestyle that you want to adopt. Simply because you love the Creator so much. You love the person who saved you so much and you're so thankful to them that naturally the only thing you can do for them, you can't ever repay them. But if you could, the only thing you possibly could repay them with is to be more like them. So this whole thing about like objective convictions, subjective convictions, gray areas, people asking, should I spend my money here at this company that supports things that I don't like? Should I go see this movie that was funded by this company that does things that I don't like? Honestly, I think they're irrelevant questions. I really do. Again, I do believe that there are some objective convictions that are backed by the Word of God. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, what matters is where your heart is. And if your heart is in the right place, then you won't have to worry about doing these things and messing up. You won't have to worry about making the wrong decision. For example, if you're a Christian and you shop at Target, a company that has been pretty progressive over the last couple of years, if you shop at Target, I don't think you're going to go to hell for that. If I'm being blunt, I don't think that God is going to pull up your resume when you get to heaven and say, oh, yeah, he shopped at Target. Sorry, you can't come into heaven. I think God's going to look at that and go, well, he did all of this sin, and the sin that he did is, the pages are miles long. But then he's going to look at the other page and go, oh, wait, he accepted Jesus into his life. And he's going to throw that page away. And he's going to go, well, doesn't matter. He was saved by the grace of God. He was saved by the grace of me, God. So he was saved by the blood of Christ. And he's going to go, okay, come on in. As long as that's where your heart is, right? Because like I said, you can't fake it. You can't accept Jesus at an altar call and be baptized and then continue to live your life in sin and do whatever you want. That's not real. You're faking it, and you can't do that. God's going to see it. I truly do believe that a lot of the more trivial things, I don't think it matters that much. I really don't. You might want to do it for other reasons. Maybe you have moral reasons, not necessarily spiritual reasons, but you just have moral reasons. And if you have those reasons, that's fine. You do you. You know, you can spend your money however you want. But in general, at least in my opinion, I don't think it's that big of a deal to worry so much about, I really can't spend my money at Target because God's going to kick me out of heaven for it. I don't think that's going to matter, because ultimately your heart is with God. As long as spending money at Target doesn't get in between your relationship with God and it doesn't create separation, then I think you're fine. I think you're ultimately fine. So that's the point I wanted to get to. Hopefully it was concise enough, and hopefully it makes sense, because I do tend to ramble and go on about endless things. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. But you know, to recap, yeah, there are objective convictions, things that we should not be doing regardless of our opinions, and that is backed by the Word of God. But these empty, like, trivial things, should I go get a coffee at Starbucks, knowing the things they support? Should I go watch this movie created by a studio that says these things? Should I get involved with this sport that decided to make this political stance? Those trivial things, ultimately the decision is up to you, and whatever you do is up to you, and it's up to you and God. I don't necessarily think there's a right or wrong answer. I just believe that it's so trivial that it doesn't matter. I really do believe that. Again, that's just my opinion, but that opinion is based on the belief that God is not a taskmaster, and God cares where your heart is. And as long as your heart is with Him and what you're doing doesn't get in between you and God, and it's not an objective conviction that's backed by faith, as long as those things are all true, as long as they all check out, then I think you should be fine. So don't worry about spending a couple dollars to buy toothpaste at Target, you know. Unless you have moral reasons or political reasons, those are totally fine. Those are totally valid. I'm not trying to bash you against for having those. I'm talking just spiritual reasons. Just spiritual reasons, I think you're fine. I don't think you need to worry about it. Anyway, so that is going to conclude today's topic. So we're going to go into the last segments. And I do want to bring up something, because today's topic was all about the Bible and all about verses. On these episodes, I'm not going to have a 5-minute devotional at the end, because the whole episode was a devotional, really. So the devotional is really only going to be on the episodes where I talk about something fun. I think next week I'm going to, take a little bit of a breather and do something much simpler. I think next week I'll probably do a topic like, I'll just talk about my favorite video games or something like that. Just something super simple, super fun, get to know me a little bit. And in those episodes, then I'll have a little 5-minute devotional. I'll talk about a couple verses. But in these episodes, the whole thing's a devotional. So I don't think I need to go any further. So we're going to go ahead and just go into our last 2 segments, which are the book that I'm currently reading and that I recommend to you guys, and then a prayer request. So, book I'm currently reading is still If Ye Shall Ask by Oswald Chambers. I have not finished it. If you didn't catch last week's episode, I talked about this book. I don't know this guy. I've never heard of him prior to reading the book, but you can tell by reading the book how spiritually intelligent this guy is. The book is all about prayer and how prayer is misunderstood in a lot of ways, and how it is the ultimate weapon, the ultimate tool that Christians have in their arsenal. Prayer is huge. It's so vital to your relationship with God that if you're not praying, then he would argue that you don't even have one to begin with. So, highly recommend it. Get If Ye Shall Ask by Oswald Chambers. I will be leaving a link in the description of this video so that you can pick up your own copy at Amazon. If you have some kind of moral or spiritual reasons to not shop at Amazon, then you're out of luck. Sorry about that. Kind of goes off of today's topic. So today's prayer request comes from a woman, two people. Actually, they had the same prayer. Their names were Jasmine and Tatiana. And the prayer is, finding God amidst the chaos. This is huge. I think all of us can relate to this in some way, where our lives tend to just kind of move on, and it can be hard to make the right decisions, like what I was talking about earlier, and it can be hard to find the joy and goodness of God in the chaos of this world. And on top of that, on much simpler things, it can be hard to even act like God. It can hard to shine God's light when we're so busy with our schedule, because we all have a schedule. We all have a routine. Sometimes it's easy just to get used to that routine. You become kind of jaded by doing that routine over and over. And you stop every once in a while and you say, whoa. I'm just living life. I'm not thinking about how I'm treating people. I'm just like everybody else. It's like, what can I do in my daily life to shine God's light more than what I've already been doing? And I think that's a really beautiful prayer anyone can have. How can I shine God's light more in my daily life? How can I remind myself and keep myself on the right track in my daily routine? Going to work, dealing with upset customers, going to school, being bombarded by tests and homework, going back to your family's house and dealing with family issues. In all of that, all of those places, all of those situations, how can I radiate God's light more often? And how can I be conscious of it as well? So I think that's a good prayer for Jasmine and Tatiana. Thank you for sharing that prayer. And I hope that all of you will take the time to pray for them. Anyway, that's all the time that I have for you guys today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please consider hitting that subscribe button. I plan to continue making this series, and I've got a bunch of other things that are up my sleeve I plan on releasing in the near future. That meeting that I had with my friends, that was regarding one of my short films. So that's exciting. But again, thank you all so much for watching. Please hit that subscribe if you want to see more, and comment down below any prayer requests that you have, questions that you have for me, whether it's personal or spiritual, whatever it is. I'll see you guys next week, hopefully on time, and I hope you all have a blessed week.